Hello, everybody. Bienvenue à toutes et tous. My name is Michaela Davies, and along with my producing team at the Siminovitch Foundation, I am thrilled to welcome you to the Siminovitch Forum. Before we get started, I would like to recommend that you watch today's panel conversation in speaker view. To do that, look to the top right-hand corner of the Zoom meeting. There you'll find a button that says View. Click that to switch from gallery view to speaker view. Choosing speaker view will give you the best experience for today's event. Today's event is also being simultaneously interpreted into French. If you would like to hear this evening's conversation in French, click the interpretation button at the bottom of your Zoom screen and then choose French. ASL interpretation is also available. Should you require this, please locate the chat icon in the lower portion of your screen and send a direct message to #1 support in the chat. If you require closed captioning, locate the live transcript icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen and select. I will give you all a moment to make any changes you might like. Just so you know, if you're having any technical trouble at any point in the event, you can send a direct message to #1 support through the chat and someone will answer you right away. You will also hear everyone who speaks this evening offer a visual description for any vision impaired folks that might be in the audience. A visual description sounds something like this. Michaela is a white woman in her early 30s with long brown hair and green eyes. She is visibly excited for this evening's discussion. On behalf of the Siminovitch Foundation, I would like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. While we're meeting on a virtual platform, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge the importance of the land that we each call home. We are privileged today to be able to enjoy the benefits of this land. Turtle Island has always been a fertile place for plants, trees, animals, birds, water, and for culture and creativity. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home, and we recognize them as the past, present, and future caretakers of this land. As we're about to embark on this topic of immersive theater, I think it's valuable to recognize the connection between art and the environment. Indigenous people were the first storytellers on this land, and I want us to pay our respects to the elders, past and present, and the essential tradition of oral history. Thank you to the people on whose territory we are able to live and thrive. We pledge to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration, and to be partners in the care of the land, water, and all who live here. I would now like to introduce you to our host. To moderate today's conversation, Mitchell Cushman. Mitchell is based out of Toronto and is the founding co-artistic director of Outside the March, one of Canada's leading site-specific theatre companies, and the 2013 Siminovitch Prize protege. His work has been seen on stages as large as the Royal Alexandra Theatre and the Stratford Festival, in spaces as intimate as living rooms, and in locales as far-flung as London, New York, Finland, and Japan. I am a big fan of Mitchell as an artist and a person, and I am so pleased to welcome him here today as our host. Hi, Mitchell.
Thanks for having me. I'll just share that Mitchell is a white cis man in his mid-30s with relatively unkempt brown hair, brown eyes, and a short beard, which he unoriginally grew during COVID. He's wearing plastic green frame glasses, a blue button-up t-shirt, and a gray blazer.
Mitchell, before we begin the panel tonight, I wanted to take the opportunity to ask you a couple of questions.
Sure.
And so I thought it would be useful to start off. Can you define what immersive theater is to you?
I sort of knew that was going to be the first question, and also probably will be the most challenging moment of the evening for me. And I'll just share that how honored I am to be on this panel with practitioners who I think will view all of these themes and topics in a variety of ways. So happy to get the ball rolling, and then cannot wait for other perspectives to come to the table. I really think of immersive theater as a spectrum more than a light switch. So sort of talking about, like, I guess, aspects of practice that are immersive as opposed to something being immersive or not immersive. But I would say, like, my working definition, the immersivity I try to bring to the work I do, has to do with wanting to make theater as active an experience for audiences as possible. And that can be many different definitions of the word active: physically active, emotionally active, mentally active, spiritually active. But there's something about that drive to put audience members in an active position that draws me to immersive work.
And is it through that is that the thing that made you want to dedicate so much of your career to this practice?
I think so. Yeah, maybe intuitively more than more than as like a cohesive plan. But I think there's a charge that I get from that both as a creator and as an audience member and as a witness. So it tends to be, to me, it really just connects with the thing that only theater can do, or that I've only experienced from theater. And so it helps me stay in touch with why this medium.
What is the thing that only theater can do?
I mean, it's connected to liveness, which I know is like, a word that is like, I think, getting all sorts of new interpretations in this time, but it's embracing that thing that is going to happen now, once, and never again. And nobody knows how it's going to go before the moment of it unfolding.
Okay, we're going to cover a whole range of different genres of immersive theater. And so I thought it might be useful to get your take on some of these different definitions. So this is going to be like a fun rapid fire test.
Feel like I'm on Jeopardy.
Yeah. Can you describe what site-specific theater is?
Sure. Yeah. And I'll say that certainly, like within my own practice, like I think I discovered or connected to the idea of site-specific theater prior to sort of, I guess, gravitating to thinking of myself more as an immersive artist, but I definitely see a continuum between the two of them. I think site-specific theater, or like site-conscious theater, or different ways of referring to it, is work that really takes a lot of its directive from the unique circumstances, affordances, histories, complexities, challenges, problems from the space it's being presented in, and tries not to think of theatrical space as an empty blank void, but something that brings its own character and identity to it and acknowledges that in some way.
Awesome. Okay, promenade theater.
Promenade theater, at least as how I think of it, is theater that physically moves through space, and you're going on an active journey that probably means you're going to end up somewhere different than you started, or even if you end up where you started, you'll have gone on a whole journey along the way. And one of the things I like about promenade theater, but I think can be achieved through other means too, and actually has been explored through a lot of interesting virtual means over the last couple of years, is it gives each audience member their own vantage point. You control your own sight lines, you control your own perspective. It embraces the idea that every audience member is going to have their own unique vantage point, and that there's no one supreme vantage point to the experience. And so that's an aspect of promenade theater and immersive theater more generally that I find really exciting.
What about interactive theater?
I mean, I guess interactive theater is theater that invites the audience to participate in some way. And so there, I think, probably is a continuum between interactive and participatory theater. If I had to sort of try to, define between the two of them, I don't know. I think maybe something that comes to mind to me is interactive theater. To me, suggests that the audience really has the ability to affect and change what's going to unfold from there. That it's going to be sort of, there's a genuine place for the audience to alter the current of something. Right.
And durational theater.
Durational theater, I think, is long theater. I was having a conversation with some artists last night around, our personal opinions around like how long we think a theater experience should be. But I guess when I've experienced durational theater, it uses the concept of time as part of its story. And when I think of certain durational pieces, like one of my favorite theater experiences I've ever seen was a 12-hour show that I got to go see in Chicago some years back called All Are Tragic by a very cool company in Chicago called The Hypocrites. And at the end of that performance, everybody in the room, the people on stage and the people who are in audience, legitimately felt like we had accomplished something that could only happen by our continual presence. And so, there's something about that I guess is a touchstone to me for durational theater. I've also sort of heard it called marathon theater, and maybe owes something to that idea of a marathon as well.
Okay, that sets a terrific stage. I'm going to bring on our panelists.
Fantastic.
So first up, joining us from Winnipeg, Manitoba, Debbie Patterson is a founding member and former artistic director of Shakespeare in the Ruins. She served as artistic director of the Popular Theatre Alliance of Manitoba and is a proud advocate for disability arts through her work as founding artistic director of Sick and Twisted Theatre.
Thanks, Michaela. And I'd just like to add that I'm a white cis woman in my mid-50s with shaggy shoulder-length hair. I'm wearing a headset with a microphone, kind of a Britney Spears microphone thing. I have cheap dollar store reading glasses on, and I smile a lot.
Thanks, Debbie. Joining us from Toronto, Ontario, Syrus Marcus Ware is a Vanier scholar, a visual artist, community activist, researcher, youth advocate, and educator, as well as a core team member of Black Lives Matter Toronto. As a visual artist, Syrus Marcus Ware works within the mediums of painting, installation, and performance to challenge systemic oppression. Hi, Syrus Marcus Ware.
Hello, greetings. I'm here in Toronto in the unceded part, the part that is the territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit. This part was underwater at the time of the Toronto Purchase, making this the unceded territory. I am a Black, trans, disabled, and mad person. I have brown skin. I have blonde dreadlocks that are about 3 feet long that are piled up on top of my head in a bun, and they're sort of hanging down on the left side of my face. I have black lace glasses on and a black shirt, and I'm sitting in a white room, an art studio with lots of art everywhere, with drawings rolled up and photographs on the wall and some plants in the background. And it's great to be here.
Thank you. And joining us from Victoria, BC, Mercedes Bátiz-Bénet is a Mexican-born multidisciplinary artist, writer, and award-winning artistic director of Puente Theater, where her mission is to advocate for the inclusion, representation, and development of immigrant, BIPOC, and culturally diverse voices. Welcome, Mercedes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. And I would like to add that I'm a mestiza, cis woman with long brown hair and brown eyes, and that I'm wearing thick frame reading glasses, and I'm in a white box.
You're all wearing thick framed reading glasses. I feel left out.
And sorry, I want to. Oh.
Of course.
I'm speaking from occupied Lekwungen territory here. Thank you.
Thanks, Mercedes. And joining us from Halifax, Nova Scotia, Aaron Collier is an award-winning musician, composer, sound and video designer, performer, and theater creator born in Prince Edward Island. He is the co-founder and technical director of the Halifax-based live art company, Heist. Welcome, Aaron.
Thanks, Michaela. Thanks to everybody. I am a white, cis, 40-year-old male with a bald head, and I'm also wearing some thick glasses. I have hazel eyes and a brown beard on my face. I'm sitting in a green room. It's my music studio, so there are some keyboards and synthesizers behind me. And when I smile, there's a gap between my 2 front teeth. I am calling in from Awoken in Mi'kma'ki, the territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
Thanks, Aaron. Okay, Mitchell, I'm going to hand this over to you. I will see you on the other side.
Thank you so much, Michaela. So we're going to begin with a couple questions that I would love to hear each of our panelists respond to if people feel comfortable, and then from there we'll gravitate into some more specific questions for each of you. But my hope would be that the spirit of the whole conversation is, interactive or a back and forth. And so if anyone feels like they have anything that they would like to jump on or add, if you just unmute your microphone, we'll aim to leave space for that. And those of you following and watching and listening, if you have additional questions you'd love to hear everybody or somebody respond to, if you want to put those into the chat, we'll do our best to incorporate them either as this part of the event or later on in the event. But I'll try to keep an eye on that as well. So I think as a perfect place to start, I'd love to hear each of you chat a little bit about what makes something immersive to you, what makes a theater performance or an artistic event immersive, and what you feel like that offers that perhaps a more traditional piece of performance or art you don't find as much in. And yeah, maybe I'll just deputize Syrus Marcus Ware to start, not to put you on the spot, but just so we don't have that awkwardness of no one knowing who to go first.
Great. Yeah. I mean, for me, so much of what I think about when I think about immersive theater is this opportunity for us to blur and blend that line between audience and practitioners, on the, so that there is this way that the audience is invited in and is having a different kind of experience that is that is integrated, so in the immersive theater that I've experienced and witnessed, and the immersive theater that I've produced and created, I've tried to create opportunities for vastly different engagements to happen than someone coming and sitting in a quiet air-conditioned room in a chair and not talking to anybody for 2 hours. That is less compelling to me than the idea of the audience being on the stage, or there being no stage, or things happening outdoors, or things happening in the audience's homes where the play comes to them. Like I'm really thinking about it in a vast way.
Love the way you capture that. That's fantastic. Anyone else would like to jump into the question? Yeah, Mercedes.
Yeah, I want to add that for me, it's an invitation for that conversation between audience and performer to really take place in a more fluid way. When there's a fourth wall, I feel like that conversation is quite muted. And it takes a lot from the performers to really try to push through that wall and feel the response of the audience, so that the performance and the piece can actually take the shape of a conversation. And so for me, I really like to explore with inviting them and breaking that wall in different capacities, so that conversation can just explore and be fluid, and so that it can also change the course of the performance. And become a true conversation with the audience as an active participant. I think that activeness of the audience, and I find also that when you invite them to be part of the performance in that way, and you break that wall, their sense of agency completely transforms the piece and transforms what you thought the piece was about, because it's no longer about what the writer, director, the designers, the performers, what the team of creators wants to put there. Now it's becoming the collective meaning of the piece. So that's suddenly being revealed to you as a creator as well in a communal space. And to me, that's beautiful.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, Debbie.
Yeah, for me, it has to do with having our bodies in a space together, and sharing physical space. In my own practice in immersive theater, being a person who moves through the world in a non-normative body, I use a wheelchair to get around. I feel like the stories that our bodies tell are important, and that they're theater is really an exploration of the human condition, which is about living in a body in the world, right? So bringing our bodies together is part of the, sounds very intimate when I put it that way, but it is part of the intimacy of that immersive experience. And also it's about the contract that we have with the audience. In a traditional theater space, there's a very specific contract that we have with the audience. And when we break out of that specific relationship, all these new possibilities suddenly open up about how we can engage, what that relationship is, and about being really specific about our choices around that relationship. Yeah.
That's amazing to hear you all speak. I'll be honest, it's something, the definition of this is something I've been really only recently thinking about, and I've started to think about how the audience has, I love this idea of these unexpected things happening where the audience can feel something, or maybe the audience themselves can feel other than themselves. They can feel somehow that they aren't themselves for the duration of this piece, or that they feel active transformation when it's happening, or that maybe and maybe this is a blurry line, but this, or that the space holds that potential, that this is an unreal space. This is no longer just a theater, it's no longer just a room, but something about it has transcended reality, and that, you know, when they come back after the show, they're actually coming back into reality because somehow they left it during the performance.
It's wonderful. Thank you, Aaron, and everyone for sharing. A lot of common threads there, and love to pull out the some of this language around that we heard around an invitation to the audience, or contract with the audience, agency from the audience. I'm getting a sort of a sense that an aspect of maybe the practice in this room is opening up the possibility for theater to require something of the audience, and I'm be curious to hear each of you talk about how you think about that invitation or contract, specifically in relation to a time where, perhaps attention spans are getting shorter. I was thinking about that when we were talking about durational theater, or there might be a more of a passivity specifically to other mediums, and how you think about navigating that ask to an audience. Anyone who would feel compelled to go first? Mercedes.
I think it depends on the piece and what the piece demands and the story, and how you want to give voice to the character of a particular location, and as you were saying in your introduction, Mitchell, there's a spectrum of interactivity or immersiveness within the audience, and so it really depends for me and the work that I've done, and when I've used immersive theater, it depends on the story and the particular story, and sometimes it's a physical demand that the audience needs to do, walk from station to station, promenade theater, this, that, and actively affect the action, interact with characters, maybe even change the course of the story. Sometimes it's an emotional ask, and sometimes it's a psychological ask. Whether you're asking them to piece together story through a very long period of time or through different spaces, and you're asking them to, in a sense, construct the story in their minds and hold that. So you're asking a lot of focus, a lot of attention, and a lot of them that perhaps is not physical demands, but I think there's a lot of, it depends on the story. I like to also try to push boundaries with each piece. I don't do it on purpose, but looking back, I realize that in a sense that's part of what interests me. And I like to put the audience as close to having that visceral experience as possible. So if you can create a situation where the audience is gonna inhabit or be forced or be put in a position where they have to come to terms with what one of the characters is going through, that I really am interested in that, to see how far you can push that. And it's for their benefit in the end. It's for them to really get closer to the meaning that you're trying to bring to the table, as opposed to top down or telling them about it from a distance. You're asking them or inviting them to inhabit it, to really be part of it and to viscerally experience it, so that then the experience completely changes. So for me, I like pushing those boundaries, and I like to experiment with different asks, from whether it's physical ask or psychological. That's a lot of what I've been trying to figure out lately. How much can you ask psychologically of the audience, so that they're actively having to piece it together as you're going through? Otherwise, they'll miss what's going on there.
Thank you, Mercedes. Anyone else? Yeah, Debbie.
I've been thinking a lot more about consent within this question. So when we started Shakespeare in the Ruins, it was like almost 30 years ago, and we had a different idea about consent at the time, and we would have scenes occurring within the audience, and we would physically move people out of the way in order to play the scene, and it was all very playful and fun. But I don't think we would approach it in the same way now. I don't think we would touch anyone without their permission, or we wouldn't roughhouse with the audience the way we used to. It's just not okay. And I also, so along with that, there's this obligation, I think, to prepare an audience because it's outside of the usual relationship that we have with the audience. I think it's important to prepare an audience just like we would with a relaxed performance, you know, letting people know what's going to happen when they get there, or with trigger warnings or anything like that, you know, that this is, we'll be exploring this idea in this way, and you may be called upon to participate in some way, so that people who just are not into being seen when they're seeing a play, or being, you know, not into audience participation, can choose not to come. Yeah, there's sort of this expectation that will make theater that everybody, that is, you know, good for everybody, but it's not it's kind of impossible. And so just being really clear about what's going to be expected of an audience ahead of time, I think is an important aspect of any kind of immersive, sorry, dog, any kind of immersive experience with an audience that will occur in real space. That's my thought.
Yeah, and I would just add to, you know, that I've also loved, like when I was working on this project called Antarctica for the Toronto Biennial, it was this immersive theater and performance piece that took place inside an installation that people could live and be in at any point during the time when the performance wasn't happening, and when the performance was happening, they sat in and amongst the props and in and amongst the stage. So it encouraged this sort of durational relationship with the work, because people would come back week after week and sit in different places, because depending on where they were sitting or where they were situated in this set, in this environment, they heard different parts of the story, because different parts of the story were intentionally, you know, designed for particular people to hear. So it became this durational immersive experience. And so I've loved just really, yeah, I guess it is about just kind of, you know, pushing what people typically do. And I think I've been thinking a lot about what it means to imagine an immersive experience as we come into this new way coming out of COVID, and, you know, where it's been like, I think now about everybody crushed in this set of this performance, you know, where the actors were there and the audience was all in there and we were all so close, and it's hard to imagine now, right? But, you know, it was so magical, it was so wonderful, like it was such a good experience, but like, what will it be like going forward into this future world? So I'm thinking about that as well.
I think about that a lot too. How do you balance the things that perhaps people are most hungry for after our time of isolation, while also keeping in mind, people's health, safety, and comfort levels? Aaron, I don't know if you had anything on this theme you wanted to jump in with too.
Yeah, I'm loving this and jumping off from Mercedes, you know, with this pushing boundaries scenario. I think that the work I've created hasn't been focused on a lot of asking a lot of the audience, but of course some of them have, and sometimes in really small ways. I think about just in COVID times, making work for Zoom plays. It's kind of a tiny ask to get people to have the cameras on, and to sort of be visible to the whole audience, which is not a normal, quote unquote, normal scenario with an audience and a stage. And in the past, also creating shows that had sort of this scenario where we wanted the audience to eventually build to the point where they felt comfortable to get on stage. And that would more or less work. And I think about this boundaries and invitation scenario, about how you would, as a designer, which is kind of where my brain is, I think about finding ways to sort of, through all the elements of the play, communicate small bits of what's happening and how it works, so that slowly, without explicitly explaining things, you build a trust for people, so that at a certain point they've recognized that there's been, okay, the performers are really comfortable dancing together, the music's really loud, I've seen them sort of do a dance on stage. They've invited us to stand up a couple of times, like bit by bit, that you're sort of trying to ask for their trust. And so it's sort of in a way manipulative, but ideally not with any bad intentions, but a way to manipulate the audience into this scenario where they say, oh no, I do want to be in this. I do want to turn my camera on and I want to be in this show. Those are the ways, anyway, that I think about it.
Yeah, fantastic. Love to, Syrus Marcus Ware, if I can just pick up on what you were talking about with Antarctica, maybe we could hear a little bit more about that piece, specifically in relation to the freedom that it offered, and maybe how within your own practice you think about that also in relationship to curation. Do you find it difficult as an artist to give up that level of control and know that people will experience it in a different or fractured order? Is that where the excitement plays in? Yeah, do you ever think about FOMO? I'd love to hear each of you respond to some of that. There are definitely questions that often appear in my head, but yeah, maybe in relationship to Antarctica first.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note that like I came to theater through performance art. So I was a performance artist. I was doing this sort of wild, bizarre performance art in visual art contexts, you know, and that's initially how I got engaged in performance. And then of course, you know, ended up getting into doing theater and into writing plays and into performing and into, you know, getting very immersed in it. So the wacky performance artist in me loves the idea of an audience coming and, you know, hearing this love conversation between Marcus and Sabian, you know, while they're lying on one of the cots in the set, and the audiences that are sitting close by get to hear this intimate, really, you know, and other people get to be closer for the fight that happens between, you know, Jessica and Marcus over whether or not she's going to leave and go with them to the free territory. So, you know, I actually loved that, and I love that because we did this durational run where we performed the play 53 times over 4 months. We, you know, people could come back because we did it 3 times a week. So, you know, people could come back at any point and sit in a different place and engage in that. And I really loved kind of pushing that and pushing the limits of that. It's exciting to me, the idea of people feeling a little bit like they're part of the story. The story is happening around them. That's what I ended up, you know, kind of taking a large part of that, and I'm reimagining Antarctica for the second biennial, which is happening in 2022, and it's the follow-up story of what happens to these 11 Antarcticans who are sent to set up colonies, and what happens to the 3 that decide, nah, this is not for me, I'm not going to participate in colonization, we're going to go and set up a free territory. Well, what happens to them when they get to the one part of Antarctica that hasn't been claimed by somebody? So this piece is about what happens to them. So I've created this, again, an immersive experience that will have film elements and that will take place again in these different sections of the installation, because I just like this idea of it being very much like real life, where in real life, you know, part of the conversation is happening over here while there's something happening over here, and it doesn't happen on a box stage for us. I mean, I wish life was more simple, and it did, and you could just focus on the square in front of you. But in reality, there's all of these things swirling around us. Complexity is what I love about it. So I'm very interested.
That touches on something so interesting, which, like, in immersive theater, often the audience is so much closer than you normally would be, and so sometimes that suggests even more that it spotlights the audience as happening more for their benefit. But I think it also very much holds what you just said about the audience also getting to feel like they're a fly on the wall, witnessing something the way you would in the real world, as opposed to feeling the construction of it all being pointed in your direction. So yeah, that's again, that spectrum that we were chatting about. Curious if, yeah, how any of our other panelists think about that sort of tension between curating the perfect experience for an audience versus offering the freedom to know that people might go on their own different journey with it. Yeah, Aaron.
I really love it. I love this Antarctica piece too. I'm just going to jump on the bandwagon of loving that. And it's you mentioned a thing, Mitchell, about FOMO, and I think FOMO is real, but in this context, I don't know what the opposite, like the JOMO, the joy of missing out. where you have this, this joy, as Syrus Marcus Ware says about the joy of it being complex, and that the conversations that people can have are not the same kind of conversations after they see the same show in the same room. The kind of scenarios that people can bring as an audience member as the piece moves on is really interesting to me. And just a little tidbit that actually the fear of missing out, the opposite of it, is the most exciting part to me.
I think JOMO is really going to enter the lexicon, and you'll all know that you heard it here first with Aaron. So Debbie or Mercedes, is one of you, either of you have anything you want to respond on that point?
I like the idea of also allowing the audience to experience different points of view. So allowing within a piece to almost take sides in terms of what's happening. And then once that has occurred, I really ask them or invite them to come again and take the other side, so that they can create their own understanding of the piece by juxtaposing both experiences and then creating a third one, which would be their own understanding. So to me, that's really interesting, and to play with that and to almost set them as adversaries almost, so that they experience that conflict from their own point of view, and just to really be able to see the story from all sides in a way. So I really like doing that. And so I ask of them that come again and experience it and give again all of that and immerse themselves like yet again, but from a completely almost opposing point of view.
I'd love to switch gears a little bit, Debbie, and ask you a question about, this really relates to thinking to the theme of immersive theater and interpretation of text. So I know that you directed a production of the Crackwalker, which might be a piece that some folks with us today may have seen in a more traditional theater space, or perhaps saw either your production or a different, more immersive production. But I know when I was reading about it, you chose to begin the production in a bus shelter, and that the audience has had an encounter, perhaps that they didn't realize was part of the play, but then became, maybe shed a different vantage point. And so I maybe just love to hear you chat a little bit around how you gravitated towards that, and how you felt like it maybe evolved an interpretation of something that's kind of a Canadian classic.
Right. So we had the audience go out in small groups and hang out in this bus shelter. And then the character that was playing Teresa got off the bus. It was an indie production, and we were only able to do this because she already had a bus pass, so she could get on the bus repeatedly and get off in front of the audience. But she would do the first monologue about why she left the home she was in before, and why she was going to Sandy's in this bus shelter, and then bring the audience inside this Legion. And we were in the basement of the Legion where the rest of the play took place. But before she showed up, there was this other character who's an Indigenous man who would come into the bus shelter and would bum money. And it's in an area of town where there are a lot of people who are panhandling. And so a lot of people thought that didn't realize he was an actor in the show, and would give him money and felt very good about themselves for giving him money. And then came down into the venue, and he showed up in the play. And so it just made them rethink who they thought they were looking at, who they thought they were giving money to. And what, I don't know, made people encounter their own racism in a very private but specific way, so that they would I just wanted to see, I wanted to give people an opportunity to challenge their own racism within that production.
Just really evokes that idea of complicity, I think, that has been discussed already. On this in this meeting, but like a very visceral example. Thank you for sharing that. I'm jumping all over the place, but I just want to make sure we hear enough about each of your really interesting work while we have the time. Aaron, I know you've done a fair bit of work and experimentation with virtual reality, which is often something that I feel like comes into the conversation or gets put on a continuum with immersive theater. And yeah, I know, from some of my own very limited experiences with VR, like I do think that sort of tenets of VR and immersive theater have something to speak to one another. Maybe you could just chat a little bit about the experiences you had with VR and how you feel like that informs your immersive practice and perhaps immersive practice moving forward.
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to continue my role of sounding like the worst immersive theater artist in the world, but I don't have very much interest in VR technology itself. And I just want to say that because I think it plays into sort of how my experience unfolded and then also how it got delivered to audiences. I've tried virtual reality. It's totally amazing and wild and like what I mentioned before, if my goal is to transport the audience somehow so they feel like they're in another place or not themselves, virtual reality can do it very well. But in my context for this, I was working on a show that was, it was a personal story. It was related to me and my family and somebody in my family that I have never met, who passed away before I was born. So I had been workshopping this piece and it sort of was, I call it a musical storytelling show. So there's music that I wrote that is playing, and I talk about the music and also tell my the story of me and my family and my relationship to this person. And in first iterations, I had told it, inside a little geodesic dome to 8 people. And there was a pool in the middle of the dome that had a speaker attached to it and it vibrated. And it was really quite wonderful and interesting and very immersive in a way. The next iteration, I ended up making it sort of for 20 people so that they could sit in a circle around me. And I stood on top of this circle, which had projectors pointed at it. And I did the same thing, but at this point it was extrapolated to be a 50 minutes, fairly complete idea. Our company thought, do we want to see how this could scale? What if it was for 200 people? Can something like this scale so that more people can be a part of it? And mostly because the music was electronic music, and a lot of the feedback we were getting was that people wished it was bigger. People wished it was more immersive and louder. But it was a very intimate story, a personal, true story. So we were working on that when our lives all shifted greatly and the pandemic hit. And having quite a bit of experience in working with digital means, we decided to see what it meant to do this with digital contexts. And that's sort of when this idea came. We tried it digitally. We tried it like this. We tried it with a live audience and a digital audience. And the whole thing was never really sitting. This whole intimacy of connection directly with the audience was hard to obtain in the digital format. And I kept asking myself, why am I telling my life story to these strangers? They seem to like hearing it, but it's really personal. Do I actually want to tell it to them? Spoiler, I don't really. But a light bulb went off when I recognized that in VR technology, you have the ability to change the perspective really intensely. And what I thought about was perhaps if I told my story directly to this person in my family who passed away that I never met, what if I told it all directly to them? And we would have a scene partner on stage with me that would wear a virtual reality headset with a camera attached to the front of it. So my scene partner is in virtual reality for the full 60-minute presentation, and the audience sees from their perspective. And I treat them like they are my family member, and I deliver the show exactly to them. And so it sort of ended up creating this possibility of a one-on-one experience with many people. I'm very much in my heart and mind connected to my family member, but everybody else just feels as though I'm talking to them, I suppose. And, it's best enjoyed with headphones. So the sound design is made to be completely immersive and continuous. And then through the use of virtual reality, the possibilities to just be in a room with me, but then suddenly be in a completely different open field surrounded by a strange sky with a floating red sphere is possible. It's possible. So that's sort of what the VR technology had unlocked for me in this way of people are still at home, sitting on their couch, maybe in a dark room, looking at a computer screen, perhaps. But I try to maintain, like, you know, constant direct eye contact and constant direct sort of emotional contact with one person. And to them, that's them.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Aaron. It sounds like an exquisite experience and exciting that in that journey you sort of found very purposely found the form that suited the story best, which is, I think, one of the things I love most about immersive theater. I also love how you touched upon, like how it sort of freed you up from reality in a way, and within the spectrum of immersive theater, it does make me think that, like, we think of site-specific theater, we think about work being really rooted in the here and now around us, but I think there's also such a gateway to magic within immersive theater. And I know, Mercedes, magic realism plays quite a role within some of your practice, and I just wanted to invite you to maybe speak a little bit about that in relationship to what you feel like immersive theater makes possible.
Absolutely. First, I want to say, Aaron, your piece sounds incredible, and I would love to see it. And I love how you found a way to not lose that beautiful connection and intimacy with that you would have had with your family members. So that's really beautiful, and that you allowed to share that with people that you don't know at such a large scale, and that you found that way around that. Beautiful. So I would love to see that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, well, I am from Mexico originally, so magic and surrealism plays a big part of our everyday life. You know, Salvador Dali, when he moved to Mexico, said, I can't live. He was there for 6 months and said, I can't live here. It's too surreal for me. So he went back to Catalonia. But so I realized throughout the years that I put a lot of that in my work, but it takes other people to tell me that it's magic realism, that's what's going on. I'll speak of maybe quickly about two immersive pieces that I've done that really touch on that magic realism. One was in Victoria. There used to be a big festival called Luminara Festival. It was a big festival, 10,000 audience members that would gather one day at Beacon Hill Park, which is our big park, and everybody's asked to create a lantern. It's a festival of light. It was a festival of light. So the entire city would take months. You know, some people would like spend the entire year really thinking about it and create, like, you know, some people would arrive with a small lantern, but many would create magical, gigantic, giant lanterns. So it was a real communal experience for the entire city, and I beloved event. It got too big, and then the park started suffering for it, so they ended tragically the event. But one year they asked me to create and they wanted me to do an installation, and I thought, well, why create an installation when I can create a theater piece? So I made a promenade piece where I had 7 stations where the audience would come and go from station to station, interacting with the actors and the musicians and all of that. But I knew that they were all going to be bringing lanterns, and this a way of interacting with the piece. That one, I didn't know what lanterns they were going to bring or what shape or form it was going to take. But I invited them to through the play, and I didn't say anything because there were so many people, so it kind of has to happen live as they're experiencing the play, without words, without, you know, front of house, anything. It's just you stumble upon it in this pavilion and then you're in it. So what I was asking of them, by showing them, you know, with some of the actors doing, by creating almost like giant puppets or giant creatures, and they were fashioned out of in Mexico, we have these mythological figures called alebrijes, and they're made out of they're composed out of different animals. So the head of a lion, the tail of a snake, the wings of a bat, the teeth of a dragon, etc. It's just as many as you want, the better, the more the merrier. and they have often many sides, many heads, many tails, and they're alebrijes. So, and they're very much a part of our life, and we all, because we all know that humans have many facets, many lives, many faces. So we're constantly in touch with our alebrijes, so with our different animal sides, and so we each have our own mythological shifting character. So I kind of wanted to see that, but in light. So I was asking them, without asking them, like by showing them how they saw me. And so the person with their lantern, so some people would have massive birds, you know, others would have wings, others would have flowers, whatever. So in movement and in dance and with the music that was being played live, we were creating this giant alebrijes that people were creating, and they were moving through the space. And it was all in the night, so you could only see these beautiful creatures being almost in beautiful dance with the music that we were playing live, being created and affecting then the characters that were there. So it was a very much a beautiful, very magical communal experience that only could happen there. And we didn't know what was going to happen. And it was incredible to see how into it the audience got, and how when they realized that they could participate in such a meaningful way in terms of affecting the course of the story and what was happening, we were all creating the piece together, and it was magical. It really was beautiful. And these mythological creatures that we all invented in that moment were it was beautiful. So that was one that I really enjoyed kind of instigating. And then another one was a piece that I just did for the NAC. I was asked to create a grand act of theater by the NAC for the Grand Act of Theater series. But when I was asked, this was in February, it had to be a live performance with as many people as possible. When I was asked to do this, we were in lockdown. We couldn't gather in BC and Victoria. The largest group of people that could gather live by our health orders were 10 people in total outdoors. So I thought, how am I going to do this? How am I going to create a grand act that encapsulates the moment in time, which was the directive that I needed to encapsulate within this piece? Anyway, after a long thinking moments, I wanted to explore two things. One, the inability that we all had at that point, and we still have this to many degrees, of being able to gather or not gather in large amounts of numbers right now, and how that would feel within the context of a pandemic and the context of that danger and that prohibition of like, no, you cannot gather, even with your family, with the ones you love. And it really reminded me of how immigrants feel. As an immigrant, we've already kind of been experiencing this pandemic life of seeing all your loved ones on a screen for years now. They're far away, we can't touch them, we can't be with them in the same space. And so for me, I kind of wanted to pay homage to how immigrants experience life far away in little Zoom meetings from our family, and that in a sense we're alone and we're disjointed, we're disconnected from our culture, from our people, from our language, from our family. So I kind of wanted to explore all of that, but I also wanted it to be like a big celebration. So what I decided to do was to have one actor play 21 roles, 21 characters, and he's hosting a wonderful fiesta. And suddenly the host is there, and I'm asking a lot from the audience because the piece ended up being almost 3 hours long, because he does his, so in the end, I overimposed all the footage of all these 21 characters, but the live audience that was there can't see everything that's happening at the same time. So the final product, you'll see all the 21 characters interacting together, but when in the live performance, the actor in his first role is doing all his everything for the 5 minutes, and then exits, changes costume, then comes back as a different character, does his track, and I'm layering all of this and piecing it all together, but in the audience's mind. So I wasn't sure how, one, they were going to follow the story, because of course you have to really keep all of those layers, 21 layers in your mind to piece it all together so that at the end you understand the story. So I was really interested in seeing how the audience was gonna react and how much they were gonna be focused, because it required an extreme amount of focus from the audience and to really employ memory, and they were really invested. And so it amazed me how much we can push them and how much they are hungry in a way to not be fed everything, all at the same time, and to create a different kind of story and for it to unfold in different ways than we normally do. So in the end, I asked them, did you understand the story? I wanted to hear, and yeah, it was really magical, because in the end they were, it was like floating characters that they had to keep in their mind. And now when the video is going to be released, they're going to be able to see all the characters interacting in the same. So in that sense, I was able to do this grand act in the pandemic with just the one actor, but playing many, many roles and have my big fiesta.
That's wonderful, Mercedes. Thank you so much for sharing both of those pieces. I can't wait to experience the film of that. I know in a moment we're going to move to our breakout rooms, but I just want to get to one audience chat question before we go, and maybe I'll throw it to you, Syrus Marcus Ware. There's a question in the chat from Heather Brooks Hill about what inspired the panelists to move in the direction of immersive theater. And because you already began to share your trajectory in relationship to performance art, maybe you could just kind of let us know if you can pinpoint something that really turned you on to theater and immersive theater specifically on that continuum.
I have to say I was in Banff, and I was doing a residency with a bunch of incredible artists and practitioners. It was interdisciplinary, so there was artists from all across, from dance and theater and performance and visual art. And I was talking with Vanessa Kwan, who's the director of Grunt Gallery in Victoria, and we were talking about this incredible production that had happened in Vancouver called 21, which was loosely based around the Tibetan Book of the Dead and took place over 21 days and was this sort of interactive engagement with the audience. And I sat on the edge of my seat listening to the description of this production, perched on the hill on the edge of this mountain in Banff, listening. I wasn't even in the audience of the show, but I felt like I was, because I was just like, and then what happened? And then how did it go? I was so engaged in this idea of this immersive experience that took place over a period of time. It was like that, in Alison Bechdel's Fun Home, the Ring of Keys moment, where the young person sees the 50-year person and is like, oh, that's me. And this is what I felt like when I heard about 21. And I'm sorry, I'm forgetting the name of the producing company, but it was just, it just turned a spark on for me. And so I've been fortunate that I've had commissions where I've been able to experiment and where I've been able to say, okay, well, what does this mean for me? And how would I like to explore this? And so, that's sort of how it came and how it's going, how it started, how it's going. I'm working on this production, Burned, with Rodney DeVerlis, and it's a dance and immersive textile work. But basically our idea is that the show begins as soon as you buy your ticket. Things start happening in your life. Things start coming to you, coming to your phone, coming to your doorstep, coming to your, in all of these different ways, these immersive experiences will sort of shape around you rather than you just coming on this one particular day. So I'm excited to experiment and to see where it takes me.
That's wonderful. And I love I love referring to it as your Ring of Keys moment. Time permitting, I'd love to hear everyone's Ring of Keys moment, but I know, I think we need to move on to the next portion of this. So I will turn things over to, Kyla to shepherd us.
Thank you all so much. This has been really interesting. Okay, so now we are going into 4 breakout rooms. So for all of you who asked some questions in the chat, this is your chance to engage directly with the panelists.
I know we just only have time for one more question for, maybe our group of panelists to answer before we wrap up. And I want to take something that I had been planning to use for our last question, but also incorporate a great question that Chris Dodd asked in the chat of Debbie's room where I was just in, which is around how can immersive theater offer more possibilities for access and accessibility for a range of audiences? How can we make immersive theater more inclusive as opposed to less inclusive? And the question I've been planning to wrap up with was a question about our current moment, and like, as has been touched on, moving hopefully out of this lockdown-esque world back into a connection with one another, but still with a lot of both memories and realities of the implications of the pandemic still with us. And so I've certainly heard it said lots that through virtual performance, a lot more has become accessible. And so I think that there are certainly beautiful things that have come out of experimentation during the pandemic. There's also things that we're missing and craving. And so, yeah, I'd just be curious if each of our panelists could talk about how they feel like, what they feel like immersive theater has to offer to this next moment, this moment that we're moving into, and with an awareness of how it can speak to as many populations as possible. Whoever would like to go first.
I can go first.
Debbie, sure.
Well, and okay, Erin, your show is very accessible. I know that there are a lot of people that I loved your show. I loved your show. There are a lot of people who can't leave home. A lot of people with disabilities just don't go out, right? And so this moment has been amazing. We've been able to collaborate with an artist who never leaves home because of multiple sensitivities. So it is, I mean, making our work available online is really important to being accessible. But also if you're doing, site-specific work or promenade work, bringing in consultants early on and just like saying, how do we help people move from place to place? Where should the ASL interpreter be standing for this scene? And, whether it's shadow interpretation or whether it's, but just bring in consultants and plan for it early. And no production will be accessible to all people with all access issues. Just as it's like the idea of universal access is a bit of a unicorn, but we can certainly make it as accessible as possible to as many people as possible with plenty of consultation.
Thanks, Debbie. Erin, do you want to go next because you were about to dive in?
Yeah. Yeah, I think, it definitely on that area of digital theater, being able to talk to people regardless of where they are has been a major change. It's like this scenario, this forum being normalized has made it possible to work with people that you don't know, but somebody does, and they'll hop on a Zoom call with you and you can discuss things. And to sort of jump on that scenario too, where some people don't like to go out or they can't go out for physical or emotional or psychological or combinations of reasons, and they could be temporary or permanent. And our company has found that that's, especially during those lockdowns, I mean, that's sort of a universal, no one can come. But we started to reach people who was like, I'm so glad I could come to your show, because going to the theater, it's not for me. It makes me anxious. I don't actually want to be there. That's not a place where I feel at home or comfortable. And so being able to reach those people, but even beyond that, the fact that when you do digital work, you sort of have already formed a kind of connection that can stay alive. People will give us feedback, whereas before we would go and we perform a show, the audience would leave, and maybe some of them would think about emailing us when they got home. But people have no hesitancy to email us immediately after the show, or to stay on the Zoom call after the show is over and talk to us, give us, feedback, or even in the moment, if it's an interactive show, we have a little thing taped to our door downstairs that says "Learning in Public," because a gracious human just helped us one day by correcting us in the middle of a performance. And it was like, thank you so much. Like, normally someone from the audience wouldn't tell you that, hey, this should be more accessible, and it isn't. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. But in this forum, they were allowed to say that. And so yeah, it's totally in many ways enriched our work that way that we hope can move forward. That will move
I was
forward.
talking in the breakout room about David Yee's brilliant work, Act of Faith, and how it was created for Zoom and how it created what Jan Derbyshire describes as a one size fits one kind of experience, because it was, made, you kind of had this one-on-one interaction, and there was captioning, and there was, all of these different things that were sort of built in that made it this, even though it was on Zoom, it was this totally immersive thing where I felt like the actor was talking to me, because they kept sort of coming in close and being like, oh, I just, having these whispering conversations with the audience. But it really felt like they were really just talking to, just talking to me, even though there's obviously hundreds of people watching. But it was just so beautiful. And I think like that is the power of this current moment, is that the pandemic has, necessity is the mother of invention. And it's required of us to think about doing theater in new ways. And so one of the things that we've done is we've innovated ways of having theater in a virtual or digital environment. And that is so exciting for me, because for all the reasons people have mentioned, for so many of us, we've seen more theater this year than we've seen ever, because even though everything's closed down, because things are online. I mean, I saw Toshi Reagan's adaptation of Parable of the Sower. I saw all these things that I would otherwise not have been able to go to, because I'm immunocompromised and I don't always go out, so it just really, we need to keep these things that are working well, and these innovations that we've developed that use this technology, so that as we go forward into this new post-revolutionary world that we're going to be going into, that we're making sure that theater is remaining accessible to all the folks who are going to be always watching it from home, who are going to always be watching it from indoors, from who the immersion is going to look a little bit different. So hoping that we always hold on to that.
Great. Thank you so much. And Mercedes, I'll give you the final word.
No pressure. Yeah, I think that by now, I think this era of the pandemic and our new realities where we're in virtual worlds and creating work virtually has really pushed us into acknowledging and accepting that we do inhabit a digital reality already. Since the invention of the internet, we've all been plugging in, where we're now part of this nervous system, digital nervous system that all we're creating together. We do inhabit the web as well as a physical plane. So as theater creators and practitioners, to think that we're over here in our physical space and that's only the real theater. I fought it a lot at the beginning of the pandemic, but I'm coming to the realization that actually this has only allowed me to see that I need to be creating also digitally. I am part of this web and digital experience where a lot of people inhabit that more than they inhabit the real world. So why wouldn't we want to be creating in both mediums, or to merge both mediums? We can, for one, access a vast number of people, not only in your city or your country, but all over the world. We do live in a world where we listen to music from all over the world, eat food from all over the world, wear things from all over the world. Why shouldn't we be consuming art from all over the world? I find that we are quite insular in Canada when it comes to collaboration, and when it comes to experiencing other work, theater particularly, because music is more fluid. So I think it's time for us to be able to share our work and to experience and consume and learn from work from all over the place. And because we can't be in a million places at the same time, especially now, this is the perfect format. So it really opens it up, and it I think for me, it's opening up different ways of creating that I didn't think were there for me to explore. And it's a very exciting time, actually, it's like unlocked. It was taking out a veil, realizing, why are you finding this? You're already plugged in. We all are. So why not creating that space as well? I think it's our duty as creators to really explore that and to create art in all the ways that life is impacting us and affecting us on a daily level, and a digital realm. We're all in it. So that for me is that.
Thanks, everyone. My face is like the Oscars music. Like, I'm here to send us off. Thank you all so much for that fascinating discussion. Mercedes, Syrus Marcus Ware, Aaron, Mitchell, Debbie, it was such a pleasure to listen to you speak. If anybody that is attending in our audience wants to drop anything in the chat, any last thoughts, we are open to hear them, anything that you learned. And I also want to thank our French and ASL interpreters, Peter, Carmel, and Catherine, for guiding us through this. Merci à tous d'avoir pris le temps de vous joindre à nous pour ce forum Siminovitch. For those of you who might not have been familiar with the Siminovitch Foundation before today, the organization has been stimulating innovation in Canadian theatre for 20 years by awarding Canada's largest and most prestigious annual theatre award. This is possible because of a community of donors and sponsors who believe that supporting artistic risk-taking is important. We want to thank a few supporters in particular for making today's conversation possible: the McLean Smits Family Foundation, Tricon Residential, the Gerald Schwartz and Heather Reisman Foundation, and Gail Asper. Thanks again for spending your time with us this evening, and we hope to see you again on October 28th for a conversation with this year's Siminovitch Prize finalists. An email with a link to register will be sent within 24 hours. Thank you so much, and good night.